We are live.
We've done it, Mark. We're live.
How about that? Our first time being live together on the internet, Brian.
Yeah, that's, you know what we call that, Mark? That's probably high-fiveable, don't you think? A little bit of a...
Oh, boy. Yeah, baby.
We're starting early with the bad joke, so it's going to be downhill from now.
Way to go,
Welcome,
guys.
everybody.
Let's go.
Yeah, we do
So
want to...
hello, everybody. Welcome. We're glad to have you here. Brian and I are going to spend an hour with you or so talking about our best tips for taking this free response exam. I'm Mark Howell. I teach calculus at Gonzaga High School in Washington, D.C. And I've known Brian for ages and ages, and I've been involved in the AP Calculus program for ages and ages. And I love doing these kinds of things. I'd love to do them a lot more if we were all face-to-face, of course, but if we are here, we are here, and this is what we're doing now. So, Brian?
Yeah, I'm so glad to be here. I've already noticed some of the comments. Yes, it's the same Brian Passwater as the YouTube Live College Board videos. Believe it or not, there's not a whole lot of Brian Passwaters in the world. So if you hear that name, it's probably the same good-looking guy as me each time. So Mark and I, like I said, we've known each other for a while. Mark was one of my calculus heroes as a young calculus teacher. And so it's exciting for me to be joined here by somebody with as much experience as Mark. Like we said, we've both been pretty involved with the AP program in different ways throughout the years, certainly with the reading, and certainly with the grading of the exams. Mark's been a part of the development committee that actually writes the free response questions on the exam. So we are excited to be here. We're going to share some tips just from our experience as a teacher and as a reader to hopefully help you get the most points possible on this year's unique exam. It's going to be a different feeling. And so I think how you prepare for this exam might look a little bit differently than how you might prepare for a normal year's AP exam. So we would love to answer questions, throw some things in the chat right there. And if we don't get to them right away, Mark, I'll make sure I write some things down. That way we can keep track of them. And Mark's going to go through the beginning here, a top 10 list, and I'll kind of monitor the chat.
And feel free. Yep, and feel free to chime in, Brian, when you hear me say something wrong, or you hear me say something right that you agree with. You can chime in then and say, "Well, Mark, that was really good." So this is my top 10 list that I made in collaboration with Brian for the free response answers on the AP Calculus exams. So we're just going to run through these tips. These are meant to help you to earn as many points as you possibly can. So the number 10 tip is don't waste time on the exam writing out recipes or procedures. Both Brian and I have been readers for a long time, and often I will read papers where students are saying, well, you know, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do this candidate test to find the absolute maximum value of a function. And so I'm going to find the endpoints, I'm going to find the critical points, I'm going to evaluate the function, and then I'm going to look for the biggest number, and that'll be my absolute maximum. Instead of doing that, instead of saying what you're going to do, just do what you're going to do, and you'll get points that way. You don't get points for writing out procedures. Number 9, say what is needed and no more. Know how to write out the most common responses that support a conclusion. For example, here's 2 ways to justify a local maximum. A function f has a local max at x equals 2 since f prime changes from plus to minus, and you can abbreviate positive and negative with a plus sign and a minus sign. The statement below says really the same thing, but in a lot more verbose kind of way. The function f has a relative maximum, and you see all those words in there because its derivative changes sign from the word positive to negative. Both of those would get the same amount of points, but the first one is a lot faster to write. Okay, so what you want to do is to earn points as quickly as you can. So be mindful of using correct mathematical notation. For example, use parentheses where necessary. Put differentials and integrals, and don't equate quantities that are not equal. In the integrand shown in the volume example, which I just skipped, but I'm going to go back in a second, it's important to have parentheses around this expression that's squared here in this setup here. So if you left off those parentheses, then and the squared appeared, then we wouldn't know what you were trying to square, and we're not going to guess what you're trying to square. Instead, if there's setup points there, you're not going to earn those setup points. Let me go back to that previous one. I forgot that I had 3 on this first slide here. So here is, or perhaps I deleted number 8. Oh, Brian, oh no. So number 8, I can tell you what number 8 said. Number 8 said, if you have the name of a function given to you in the stem of a problem, like f of x equals this big ghastly thing that you see that's squared in here, 1 minus e to the 2x minus times x cubed minus 8 all over 10 squared. F of x is named to be that function in the stem of the problem. If it is, and you're asked like for the volume of a solid formed by revolving a region around the line y equals 4, then instead of writing what you see here on this slide, replace all of that stuff in parentheses that's squared with just the name of that function, which is just f of x. And what that'll do for you is let you earn those points a lot faster, number 1, and number 2, much less opportunity for you to make some kind of transcription error. For example, maybe you forgot to write e to the 2x minus 1, you just wrote e to the 2x. Well, you're going to be penalized for that. But it's hard to misspell f. It's hard to make a mistake when you're just writing the name of a function. So number 6, learn to read information about a function from graphs and tables. I've been watching a lot of what Brian and Tony Record have been doing on that YouTube channel. And what you see from what those guys are doing there and what a lot of other people are putting out in the world about problems for this year is many, many questions that involve functions presented graphically and numerically. That is, in a table of values. So make sure that you know how to find slope, a derivative value, from looking at, say, a linear function graph. Make sure you know how to read function values out of a table of values, because almost certainly you're going to see functions presented that way. And the reason is that this is going to be an exam which is neutral to the use of the calculator. So there are not going to be a lot of questions where you have to find, say, the derivative of arctan of 2x, because some people have a calculator that can do that and others will have a different kind of calculator maybe available. And so those problems wouldn't be fair if there's points available for differentiating arctan 2x. So you certainly don't want to disregard symbolically defined functions, but just this tip is to say, be ready to read information about functions from graphs and tables. Number 5, know the hypotheses of all the theorems. There are only a few theorems that you have to know. I'm pretty sure I can name them all. They are the 3 value theorems: the intermediate value, extreme value, and mean value theorem, and the fundamental theorem of calculus. 3 of those have continuity of a function on a closed interval for the hypothesis. Easy to remember. Those are all but the mean value theorem, which has an additional hypothesis about differentiability. Easy to remember because the mean value theorem conclusion involves a derivative. So by golly, you better have a derivative if you better have a differentiable function if your conclusion involves a derivative. And for the BC student out there, make sure that you know there's 4 convergence tests that you have to know for this exam: the ratio test, the geometric series test, the p-series test, and which one am I leaving out, Brian?
Ratio.
The ratio. I said ratio test.
Geometric alternating series.
P-series, geometric alternating series test was the one that I left out. So make sure you know the hypotheses of all of those tests. That is, the conditions on which those tests can be applied. And in addition, the definitions. There's going to be problems where you're going to have to write justifications. I guarantee it, or explain your reasoning. I guarantee that those questions are going to prevail on this exam. So be ready with the hypotheses, the conditions for those tests at your side when you are ready to take this test. It's an open book test, right? So you can just have those things sitting right with you. Sorry, I've skipped number 4 here. Number 4 is do not spend time losing a point that you have earned. In other words, don't evaluate expressions that give the answer unless that expression is an integral or a derivative. So you do have to evaluate integrals and derivatives, but if a numeric expression, some numeric computation will yield the answer, don't bother doing the arithmetic that gives that answer. All you're doing is putting yourself at risk of losing a point that you've already earned. And the classic example of that, of course, is these Riemann sum setups. Number 3.
Hey, Mark, before you go on.
Sure, go ahead.
There's a lot of good questions on here, kind of tying into what you're talking about. So I want to make sure we address them real fast before we get too far into that. Couple quick hitters right here. Someone asked, there are no power series or Taylor series directly tested this year. There's Taylor polynomials, but you're not going to have to know Taylor series. So don't worry about the series part. Someone asked, could we?
Can I jump in? Can I jump in
do.
right there, Brian, for just a second? So I know when I was a student, I used to wonder what the heck the difference was between a Taylor series and a Taylor polynomial. Boy, they sound like the same thing to me. And somewhere along the line, I realized what the difference was. A series is like an infinite degree polynomial. It just goes on forever. You don't have to worry about those kinds of problems, Taylor series, on this exam. Only finite degree. That'll say, give me the 3rd degree Taylor polynomial. Okay. Sorry, Brian, go ahead.
No, you're fine. That's great. So yeah, no series ideas on there. Someone asked, there's a lot of tests that aren't being used. What if we use one of those? Will we count it off? No, you're always allowed to use other information as long as you support it appropriately, whether it's in the curriculum or not, unless the problem asks you specifically for a certain method, meaning if they preface use the alternating series test to show something, you don't get to choose to use a p-series or a ratio test. You have to use the test that they are specifying, which may be a part of this year's exam because they have narrowed down that curriculum so drastically. Somebody mentioned, and there's no perfect way to answer this, but you can, someone mentioned, should we type or handwrite our answers? You have the choice. For calculus, to be honest with you, for 95% of people, handwriting it on paper is going to be the most convenient and quickest and most clear. And then we're going to actually share a little bit later in the session tonight. I'm going to share with you 2 quick, easy ways to upload those answers. You've got a couple of options of how you can submit handwritten work, whether it's a PDF or whether it's going to be a photo, JPEG or PNG. If someone mentioned, if we do type it, do we have to just do the work on our head and then show the work? The answer is no. If you're typing or handwriting, this is one of the best advice that I could give to you. And Mark, I'm sure will elaborate more on this. Your work should be telling a story of what your brain was thinking during the exam. Do not try to make the person reading or grading your paper make connections, read your mind, because if it's not on the paper, we cannot assume that you know it. So you're telling a story about from beginning to end, showing what you're doing. That's how we award credit on the exam. So even if you're typing it, you're going to have to show those steps, at least some of those steps, to show us what you're thinking. And that's why handwriting might be the easiest way.
That doesn't mean that you want to be verbose when you're showing your work, but show your work, right? Show where things are coming from. You don't have to explain what you're doing necessarily, but doing the work that leads from some place where you start to some conclusion, that's really important. Readers are actually instructed to be very careful when you're awarding credit, because the readers are typically, they're your teachers or they're college math professors. And we are admonished to not to read the student's mind. Don't put thoughts in the student's mind. Read what's on the paper that the student submits. We know what the answers are. And so you have to stop yourself when you're a reader from filling in the blanks for a student. And so you as the student should understand that. And therefore, don't make us read your mind, right? Show us that you know what you're doing.
Yeah, and we're not very good at that. Slope fields and differential equations, we call that Unit 7 in the curriculum. That is tested on both exams this year, possibly. You will not have to draw anything on this year's exam. So without a doubt, we know you will not be given a slope field to draw the slope field, because students are allowed to take it on the computer, so that won't be an option. It is possible they could show a slope field and ask you some questions, but we have to also realize we only have 2 questions to test an entire years of curriculum. And so there's going to be a lot of things that you learn this year that just cannot be tested. So they're not trying to test every single little topic. They're trying to test to see if you're ready to go on to the next course. And so some things may not be as prevalent when you have 6 free response questions and 45 multiple choice because of that. So be careful for that. So and also remembering all the questions are designed to take away the ability to cheat, meaning you're not going to be able to Google answers. Like Mark said, you can't just type things in a calculator, get an answer, even a CAS calculator. They don't want you texting friends. That's why the questions might be, it's possible there might be more parts than you might do, in a time limit. Don't panic if that happens. And Mark's going to address that, but do what you can. And you can still get a 5 if you left one of the parts blank, right? They're trying to give students as many opportunities as possible to show that you know calculus. And so if they only had 4 parts, that would be even more, nerve-wracking as a student, because if you can't do one of the 4, it's like, oh my gosh, that's a fourth of the exam. But they give you 7 parts and you can do 5.5 of them and you leave one blank.
You're doing good.
You're doing pretty well. Pretty so good. So be careful for that. The timing, keeping your time there. But we will talk about uploading the videos here as well. So
So yeah, Brian, I'm glad you said that about not every single topic is going to be assessed on this exam. If I were a discriminating student, I'd be thinking about the things that I don't need to worry about as I'm getting ready. We have less than a week before this exam. I'm not studying all my symbolic antiderivative rules. I might study the process of doing anti-differentiation by parts. I might study what U substitution is all about, a change of variables in an integral, but I'm not worried so much about what's an antiderivative for 1 over the square root of 1 minus x squared. That's arc sine x. I'm not going to worry about studying that because it wouldn't be a fair question on an exam where some students have a computer algebra system that would give the answer and other students don't. So as you're preparing in the limited time that's left, think about the big ideas. That's what I would be thinking. I'd be thinking about the big ideas and what are they going to test? The fundamental theorem. If I'm a BC student, I'd be thinking about interpreting integrals and derivatives, right? What does this derivative mean? Explain your reasoning that gave some conclusion that you would have reached. Those were the kind of things that I would be thinking about. And also for the BC students, the other thing, I said this to my own students, and I said this in one of the sessions that I did earlier about for the National Math and Science Initiative about free response tips and strategies to prepare for the exam. This is for the state of Kentucky, saying that if they went to the trouble of putting the Unit 10 topics being available to be tested on this exam, I think they put Unit 10 topics on this exam deliberately. And I would, if I were a BC student, I'd be expecting to see something on a Taylor polynomial, and I would be expecting to see a question on one or more of those convergence tests, those 4 convergence tests that we mentioned earlier. So we've gotten off the top 10 list. Should we get back to that and finish it up, Brian, and then answer some more questions that we got? So this number 3, these last few are less specific and more sort of an emotional kind of preparation for yourself. Try every part of every problem. So there's only going to be so many points available on this exam. You might find yourself in part A or part B. There's something in that part that just scrambles your brain. Don't let yourself sit there with a scrambled brain. Instead, look for something that you can do. One of the difficulties that students run into when they're sitting for a test is if they early in the test run into a problem that makes them confused. If a student sits there and maintains that state of confusion, you can mess yourself up for problems that come later in that test. Walk away. This isn't some kind of you're not gonna be winning any points for bravery or courage or stamina, something like that. This is a short test. Move on and earn more points someplace else. Find something you can do and do it. And that often can get your brain kind of back in gear. And then maybe later you could go back and take another look at that problem that was scrambling your brain earlier. I've seen that kind of thing happen with lots of my own students. I've watched them during a test where I can see that they're wringing their hands and they just don't know what to do, and it just messes them up. Instead of for 5 minutes, it might mess them up for 20 minutes. And boy, 20 minutes on this test, that's an awful lot of time to miss. So don't give up. Look for points that you can earn. Here's a shout out for Brian and Tony and the great work that they've been doing on YouTube for all the students nationwide. These guys are, and Brian's going to show us a little bit more about this in just a minute, but it's a smart thing to actually spend time practicing answering a problem and uploading your solution in the time that's allotted. And you guys have had actual problems, new problems that you've written, right, Brian? That kids can actually work on, students can work on, and they're timed out so that they're about the amount of time that they would need for one of these, one of the actual exam problems.
Yep, I've written, if you've joined for Calc BC, we did a practice 25 or 15-minute problem on Monday, and then another 25-minute problem today. Tomorrow, we're doing the other 15-minute problem. These are all going to be, every question, by the way, every video, every day is brand new problems that I've written just for this year's exam. So they're all written with the design of only what's tested and what would it look like if I was designing the exam where kids are at home and they have access to the internet, technology, all that fun stuff.
All right. And all of those videos, all of those sessions that you're doing, you can either join them live or they're all recorded. You can go back and look at the old ones. So if you've missed the old ones, you can still go back and you have those 2 questions already this week that you can practice. And that practice, I think that the opportunity to do that, because this is something new. Nobody's ever taken an AP exam like this before. Yeah. And so the ability to practice doing that is I would say is a can't miss kind of opportunity.
Yeah.
And Mark, I have been exhorting my students to come and do this. Go ahead, Brian.
I want to put a quick plug in. If you haven't watched the YouTube videos, me and my friend Tony are doing the BC videos. You might be watching AB if you're an AB student. Mark Corrali and Verge Cornelius are doing the AB videos. They're amazing on the AB as well. If you go to mine, I know more about mine because it's been my whole life the last 7 weeks, but if you go to YouTube, go to College Board's YouTube channel, just search on YouTube Advanced Placement. You'll find their channel. Then you can find Calculus BC. Underneath each video, you'll see all the videos there. There's a Dropbox link where the comments would go. It's the same link for everything. So once you get the link once, you'll have everything we've done on there, all the problems that are brand new written FRQs for this year's exam, plus detailed worked out solutions. And then I just added something, which I will be I just mentioned today for the first time. You'll see a folder in there that's called 5 for 5, and I'm writing 5 problems a day for A, B, and BC, so you can do either one. 5 problems a day. I started giving them to my kids on Monday. 5 problems a day for 8 days, Monday through Monday, because there's 2 Mondays in there. 5 problems a day. They're kind of snippets of FRQs. Again, brand new questions that I've written to help kids prepare for this year's exam. There's a folder for AB. There's a folder for BC. And those are kind of good examples of what FRQs might look like on this year's exam. 5 problems a day to get a 5 on the exam. And then I put a new one in there each day. There's 3 in there right now. We're on day 3. And then the day later, I upload the detailed solutions for that. And I'll make sure I share the link.
Brian, that was my lesson plan for today for my own calculus class. I had my students were working on those the first 5 BC problems that you put up there. Some of them had already done them before class. The rest of them did them during class. And I'm going to be sending them another couple of days worth to work on over the weekend because I won't see my own students again until Monday. They're fabulous. Thanks, Brian. Brian's work on those things, ladies and gentlemen, has been exemplary. And it's such a fabulous resource. And I'm not saying this, Brian, to toot your horn, but because I know that I've looked at this stuff that you've done, and it is spot on for where this exam is going to be. So if you want good practice, use those problems. I can't recommend it any stronger than that.
Well, I definitely, Mark. Here's my. I'll owe you that $20 now. You know, I'm mailing you the $20. But what I want to know is what's number 1? What's number 1 on your list? I have to know.
Number 1, think positive and visualize success. I coached football for many years of my life, and I used to tell my ball players to do this same thing in an athletic event. See yourself making a play. See yourself catching the ball. See yourself running into the end zone for a touchdown. See yourself making a good block or making a good tackle. Visualize yourself answering these questions. Believe in yourself. Chances are you know more than you think you know. I always tell my students that I have a law, Brian, for preparing for responsible students as they prepare for any examination, and I call it Howell's law, and it goes like this. It goes, you always know more than you think you know, even when you take into account Howell's law. So don't think about that for too long, because it might make you crazy if you do. And if you happen to be a computer science person, you're probably already in recursion land. You're probably happy that recursion is not going to be tested on the AP Computer Science exam this year too. Anyway, but being positive and believing in yourself is really important. Having a good attitude when you walk into the well, I was going to say exam room, but it's going to be your living room or someplace like that where you have a good space set aside to do this exam. Earn the points as fast as you can. There's limited time to earn the points. If you find yourself not earning points, do something else. I alluded to that earlier when I said you get stuck. Move on. Find something else to do. Don't spend time doing work that you know is not going to earn points, like simplifying arithmetic expressions. So those are my top 10, Brian. There's other tips that we could throw out there, but these I think are if we were going to whittle it down to 10, these would be my 10. One of the other ones that I had on my list that it just came to mind now was to try to write clearly. Keep your reader in mind. The more clearly you can express yourself, the more likely it is that your reader is going to be in a good mood. We're not supposed to give some kind of extra credence for very neat work, but boy, sometimes you see a paper and the work is laid out so nicely and you think, man, this is easy to give the points to this kid.
Yeah.
So being neat is a good idea.
Yep.
Instead of scratching work all over the page. That's it. That's what I got, Brian.
Well, that's great. I want to add on to a couple of Mark's comments, and I also want to share a little bit about how you might upload your exams and how you can practice that. But I think, just so you know, as a student, one of our chief readers, I call him the King Daddy Ding Dong. The chief reader is the college professor who's in charge of the entire AP exam. Someone asked me on here in the chat, as the YouTube person doing the videos for College Board, have you seen the test this year? Oh no, there's no chance. Like, there's no teachers that have seen the test. Very, very few people. This is under like lock and key, armed guard. I bet you there's a handful of people, less than 5, that have seen this exam, and they're not people like me. I would be, below, I'm like a number 1 million. Be chief reader, important people, Mark Howell, and then a whole bunch of other people, and then I would be at the very, very bottom, possibly. But no, I have not seen it. So we're guessing like you are too. But anyway, so we're gonna definitely talk about that. But our chief reader, who's in charge of the whole exam, a former one, is named Steve Kokoska. We had him on our show yesterday going over some common student errors. And he used to always tell us that they're reading, and I love this phrase, to the readers, people that are grading the exams. He used to always say, the kid whose paper you grade at 5 o'clock at the end of the day, the last day of the reading, deserves the same respect, attention, and care that you gave the first kid of the whole week when you were energized and awake. So the reading, we do a very good job of making sure that no matter what's in the paper, we try to give the student every opportunity to earn points. We never take off points. We're always looking for ways to see, did you earn any points? As my Mark said, just keep trying, get some points. Now, if your handwriting is neat, it's a lot easier to give those points because we can follow along. If your handwriting is unclear or not readable, we try our best, but if we can't put words in your mouth. So that's what Mark is talking about being organized and being clear, because we want to give you the points, but you have to earn those points to make sure. So make sure you're doing that. And then about writing a lot of gibberish down, I always tell my students, be precise and concise, meaning be specific, don't be vague. Don't say things like the function, the graph, it, no pronouns. Be precise in your language, but also be concise. And I always tell my students, on the AP Calc exam, I don't want your life story. If you're explaining something on the exam, I have not seen a problem in the last 10, 15 years that would ever require more than a single sentence, if you know what you're talking about, that you can justify or explain your answer with one sentence. And so if you're writing a whole paragraph, you could still certainly be correct. But usually if I open up a paper and it's a whole paragraph of writing, it usually tells me the student doesn't quite understand how to explain the reason why. So they kind of just go in circles and say a lot of good things, but none of them are what we're looking for. And so you want to make sure you can get to the heart of that situation. Mark, are you okay if I share my screen?
Oh, please do. While you're getting ready, let me respond to a couple of
Sure.
questions that I saw in the chat. There was a question about the infamous L'Hopital's rule problem from a few years ago, Brian. When you implement L'Hopital's rule to evaluate a limit, it's important that you take note that you assert that the conditions under which you can apply L'Hopital's rule have been satisfied, and that you do so in a way that is not what we call mathematically offensive. So, Brian, I was grading that one of your exam problems, actually, your mock exam problems just this morning, where my students some of them were writing down that this number, I think it was 4/3, was equal to 0/0. And if you say that a number is equal to 0 divided by 0, that is to us mathematically offensive. And we will deduct points for saying things like that. If you, on the other hand, say, well, look, the limit of this numerator is 0 and the limit of this denominator is 0. So it's legal for me to say that the limit of the ratio of those two functions is the same as the limit of the ratio of their derivatives. I'm doing good work now. Yeah. And someone else asked, if I do that, do I have to say that I'm using L'Hopital's rule? And the answer to that is no. You don't have to say that you're applying L'Hopital's rule when you apply L'Hopital's rule. The names of those things isn't so important. And the same is true like for the mean value theorem. If you assert the conditions of applying the mean value theorem, and you also assert the conclusion of the mean value theorem being true, you've done enough. You've used the mean value theorem. You don't have to name it as the mean value theorem, right? In order to get the credit for that justification. So the names aren't so important, but the content is really important.
Yes. And that's don't skip over what Mark just said. He made a really, really good point. It's not about the names, but it is about the conditions. You can't just say the conclusion of the mean value theorem, or you can't just do L'Hopital's rule, right? Unless you first verify the conditions. For L'Hopital's rule, most often when we use L'Hopital's rule, we get that 0/0 form, right? But you have to show that. And you don't show that by saying equals 0/0. That's what we call a linkage error, because 0/0 isn't really a number. And so when you say it equals that, and then 5 steps later, you say, oh, my answer is 4/3. Technically, you now have two answers. You said it equals this, and now you said it equals something else. And so what we do is we take the limit of the numerator and show the limit of the numerator equals 0. We take the limit of the denominator separately, show that limit equals 0, and then you can apply it. For mean value theorem, we need to show or state that the function is continuous and differentiable both, right? We have to mention both of those ideas. So, and we'll have more about this here in a little bit. And maybe if you have time at the end, Mark, I've got my smart notebook, and maybe we'll even write down a quick example of what we mean by this notation of L'Hopital's rule, so students feel a concrete example of what that might look like. So hopefully you can see my screen. I'm sharing a PowerPoint, and if you watched our YouTube video, you might recognize this, but I want to highlight a couple things. You need to practice uploading your solutions. You do not want to take the exam on Tuesday and then for the first time try this and then realize there's a problem, right? So there's a free demo site the College Board has. You can try it as many times as you want, just practicing this. So take a photo with your phone or something real quick of the screen if you don't have this. There's an exam day checklist website, tells you what you need to be doing on exam day. And as well as a short video. It's like 4.5 minutes, 5 steps before the exam the College Board put out. All these are very worthwhile. That way you've got everything that you need before the exam on Tuesday. So with calculus, right, I'm going to go into the assumption that we're going to handwrite our answers somehow. Now, you're welcome to type it in, right? You can do that if you know how to use LaTeX or you want to use equation editor. But to be honest with you, that's pretty, it'll bog you down. I mean, I'm not sure why you'd want to do that, where handwriting is a lot easier. But you have that option. So if you're handwriting, that could be on paper. It could be on your computer. Some of you have like a OneNote or a notes program or Notability or just different programs where you can like write on a tablet or an iPad, right? that's considered a handwritten response. Anything that you're not typing on a keyboard, that's handwriting, is a handwritten response. And this is what I want to make sure you hear, because there's been a little bit of mixed messaging, and the College Board kind of changed course yesterday on this. And so originally, it was thought or kind of shared that if you were going to handwrite your answer, you have to attach a photo, right? Take a photo of it and then attach photos, like a JPEG or a PNG file. Well, just yesterday, they announced definitively, if you're handwriting, you can also attach it as a PDF, okay? And so you have to attach them differently. When you go to the portal, it'll ask you if you want to attach your solutions. And if you do that, you'll have to choose between attaching a text file and attaching photos. And it might be a little bit confusing, because if you handwrite on paper and you take a picture on your phone and you save it as a PDF, right? You handwrote it, you took a photo on your phone, you saved it as a PDF, you are going to use attach a text file option. You're not going to choose attaching a photo, even though you took a picture of your camera work, right? And so if you want to save it as a PDF, so you're going to use attach a text file. If it's going to be a doc file, that's probably more applicable if you're taking history or English courses, right, where you're typing your answers in, but also a PDF. Anything PDF is going to be in this text file. So you would do that if you're typing or handwriting, whether it's on like a tablet. Now, why would you want to do a PDF? Because here's why. For me, right, and you might be different. You got to figure out your platform. There's so many possibilities. But if I was taking this exam, how my students are taking the exam, they will open it on their computer, right, or their iPad or whatever they have. They'll open the test on their computer. They're going to handwrite their answers on paper, and then they're going to get their phone out and then take photos, right, of their work. Now, the problem then becomes, if the test is open on my computer and I'm taking photos with my phone, how am I going to get that to my computer to upload them, right? Well, if you have an iPhone, there's a Notes app, right? Every iPhone has a Notes app. If you open up Notes, there's a camera inside of Notes, which actually, if you choose the scan option, there's a scan document option, you can take all your photos of your papers and it will automatically save it as a PDF automatically. And that way, when you go to send it to your computer, it's a PDF, right? The reason why that's a good option to consider is because PDFs are smaller files than pictures are. So if you're worried about your internet speed, you've got to get your work from your phone to your computer. If you're using this option, PDFs are going to send faster. Secondly, PDFs, when you use the scanner option, it makes your handwriting a little bit more clear. Scanning it as a PDF is actually a little bit more legible than taking a photo on your phone and just using the JPEG format. So that's one benefit. If you don't have an iPhone, there's a free app called Cam Scanner, C-A-M, Cam, C-A-M Scanner. It's a free app, and it's the same idea. You can open up the app, and you can choose to take photos of it, and it will save it as a PDF. If you choose that method, you're going to have one single file per problem, meaning it's one PDF. So when you take your multiple photos, it'll turn them all into one PDF. You're going to upload a single PDF. It might have 3 pages to it, but it's going to be one PDF. The other option is just to choose the attach photos option, right? Well, when would you use that? That's going to only accept PNG or JPEG files. Typically on your phone, if you take photos, it becomes a JPEG automatically. So maybe you handwrite on paper, take photos with your phone, but you don't want to convert it to a PDF. You just want to take those photos and just, send them to your computer email or your Google Drive or wherever, and then upload them from there. That's when you would use attached photos. In that case, you're going to have to attach multiple pages, right? If your question 1 had 3 pages to it, you're going to have to take 3 photos, send them to your computer, upload photo 1, upload photo 2, upload photo 3, because you're only allowed to have one piece of paper per photo. So if it's 3 pages, you got to make sure you do 3 photos. You can do that. One quick thing I want to warn you about. A lot of phones have been defaulted to a file type called HEIC. It's like a high resolution file when you take photos on your phones, especially if you have like the live feature on an iPhone. It'll upgrade to this kind of higher format. If you don't turn that off, then it'll save it as an HEIC extension. So when you email it to yourself, you go to upload it, it won't accept it. It'll only accept those 3 files, PNGs, JPEG, or JPEG with an E. So that's why it's so important to try that demo site. That way you can get the timing down,
Right.
because I can tell you with certainty, It's okay if you leave one part blank. You can get a 5 if you don't finish the whole question. But if you don't submit your question before the timer goes off, you will get a 0 on that question. If the timer goes off, there is nothing you can do. You can't, on question 2, try to upload extra pictures to it. We will not grade it. If it was not uploaded with question 1 on time, it won't work. Now, the good news is you only have to put it in the submission and hit submit. It might take your computer a little bit to upload it into the system. That's okay. If it's not finished uploading it, as long as you've hit submit on time, the system will still let question 2 pop up. So you can work on question 2 while it's finishing in the background, but you've got to hit that submit button. So when that timer hits 5 minutes, right, the countdown, when it hits 5 minutes, there's not going to be anybody in the room telling you, hey, you need to upload, right? There's no proctor there to remind you. So you need to keep track of the time yourself, right? When it hits 5 minutes, the timer turns red. You should wrap up what you're doing pretty quickly so that way you get uploaded all the work that you have done. It's also why you want to practice uploading 2, 3, 4 times to make sure you've got it down to a science. You know exactly what you're going to do and how you're going to get it there. Anything that I missed on that part, Mark?
The only thing I can think of, Brian, was one tip that I actually heard from one of the computer science presenters, and it was a tip for taking good, clear photographs. And she suggested holding the paper vertically as you take the photograph instead of laying it down flat. If you lay it down flat, then you're probably going to make a shadow of the phone over the thing that you're taking a photograph of. So instead, if you hold it vertically, the paper vertically, and do a sort of a selfie of the page that you're going to submit, you're probably going to have a more clear photo. Mm-hmm. The only other thing I have to add to that, Brian, was a question. I saw a question in the chat about, and students always, you would answer this question this year or any year the same way, I think. What % correct do I need to get a 5? And those questions are always kind of funny for me because and this is what I tell my own students. If I told you that you needed to get 75% correct to get a 5, would you just try to get 75% of the points? Well, no, of course not. You're going to try to get every point that there is, right? So knowing the percentage correct that you need, but the best that's going to do for you is perhaps ease your mind a little bit. If you skip one part of one question because you just couldn't get it and you go on to earn some other points, you can do that and still feel comfortable. Yeah, I still got a shot at this, right? But you want to try to earn every point that's out there to earn. Don't leave any points on the table. Don't say to yourself, well, I think I got 3/4 of the points, so I'm done. Let me submit now and I could go have a sandwich, Or maybe it'd be my mid-afternoon snack if it was the calculus exam, right? Because this is a 2:00 exam, right?
Yeah.
Or 2:00 Eastern time.
Yeah. And that's one thing students need to make sure you know also. All your exams are time zone. They don't start when you log in. I mean, they start, everyone in the world is taking it at the same moment you are. So it'll be a different time in everybody's time zones. But when it's 2:00 here where I'm at, and it's, what is that, 11 o'clock on the West Coast, it's starting. So if you don't log into the system until the last minute and you have a problem trying to get logged in or something, that clock's already going. Right. If you get on at 2:04, it's going to say 26 minutes. It's not going to say 30, so you want to log on. That's why in the checklist, it says at least a half an hour early on test day, get logged in.
And that'll also ease your mind too. You won't be feeling so nervous about what you're doing, right? You're there, you're comfortable, you're feeling at peace. Life is good, calm yourself down so you're not a nervous wreck. And your brain works better when you're calm.
Absolutely. So one quick question, Marcus said, are we allowed to have 2 devices at once? And the answer to that is yes and no. You cannot have the test open on 2 devices. So if you open it on your computer, that's the only place you can click that ticket to open the exam. Now, if I open it on my computer, that's where I'm testing from. You can have another device. You can have an iPad. Maybe you have another computer where you're having like an online calculator. I hope you don't, because you're going to lose time. It's not going to help you. Or your phone to take photos. That's okay. But you can't open it on your computer, the test ticket, and then open the test on your phone as well. So there was some debate or some discussion at some point. Somebody had mentioned you could. The College Board had to retract that option yesterday. So yesterday, College Board gives and College Board takes away. They gave us the PDF option for handwriting. At first, we didn't have that option, but now they said, okay, we'll allow handwriting to be PDFs. But they took away, you cannot open the test on 2 different devices. And while we're mentioning this, Mark, please, please, please,
Sure.
please, please, if you have a computer open on the exam day, don't hit the back button and don't hit refresh. The way that the online check-in security works is the way the passwords are. As soon as you do that, it was going to lose your security credentials and you're basically going to be logged out. So then you're going to have to go back to your email on your computer, go back to the test ticket, click on it again,
Ouch.
and reopen it.
A lot of wasted
So
time. Yeah.
wasted time on there. So we'll see
Yep,
there. Okay.
yep.
So be careful there. I'm going to put on here, Mark, a link in the chat. And I know these chats are going by really fast. So I'm going to put it on there right now. This is the link. And so if you're a student on there and you're following the chat at the very bottom, you should see a link I just posted. I believe I posted it. It's in red. It's a tiny URL. This is the link that we have at the bottom of our YouTube videos for Calc BC. I know that probably most of you are probably Calc AB, right? The good news is a large percentage, about 60% of the BC exam is Calc AB. So, but this is the link I have for all the problems. And in there, one of the folders is going to say 5 for 5s. And in there on the 5 for 5 folders, there's separate folders. I have different worksheets for Calc AB versus Calc BC. So if you're a Calc AB student, there's 5 for 5s every day just for you. And there's also ones for Calc BC students that have everything mixed together.
Thanks so much for doing those, Brian. You've saved hundreds and hundreds of teachers nationwide that are stressed out doing online teaching, just their AP students, but other students too. You're helping us all out, and God bless you for that. It's a real blessing to have you doing all this great work. There were a couple of other questions, Brian, that I saw as I was scanning up through the chat. So I didn't finish my thought about the percentage that you need for different grades. I have a rule of thumb that has served me well over the years, and this is very conservative, I think. And this is, again, you're going to try to earn every point that you can, but it might ease your mind a little bit. My rule of thumb is 3/4 of the points will get you a 5 in calculus, AB or BC. 2/3 of the point pretty comfortably will get you a 4. And half the points pretty comfortably are going to get you a 3. That's historic, okay? So whether that's the same this year or not, it's really hard to say. This exam doesn't really equate to anything else that's been done in the past, but I would still use the same kind of rule of thumb. There were also a couple of questions, and this brings up another kind of question too, is the BC students need to be careful about reading through the chat and hearing our answers to these questions, because they're different answers depending upon if you're an AB or a BC student. So there was a long discussion in the chat about applications of the integral. Those are Unit 8, I think. Is it Unit 8 in both courses? And for AB students, nothing from Unit 8 is going to be tested, and that includes those contextual rate in, rate out problems. For AB students, don't worry about it. For BC students, however, Unit 8 is well and truly in play. So you may see area volume problems for BC. You may see arc length problems. You may see rate in, rate out problems in BC, but not in AB. A couple of things that I saw questions about content. One was about the Riemann sum kind of stuff. All of that stuff, I believe, is in Unit 6, and that's for both exams. So midpoint, left endpoint, right endpoint, Riemann sums, trapezoidal sums, both courses, those things can be tested. And the last thing is U substitution or change of variable in an integral. I would say for sure. In fact, I would be surprised if there were not a question that asked for a change of variable, because that's about the only way, and it would be a general function, as Brian's written several questions like that. I think it'll be a general function. It's not going to be like antiderivative of cosine 2x or of e to the x squared times x, something like that. It's going to be a general function. Like here's a derivative for f of x. Give me an antiderivative for f of, here's an antiderivative for f of x. Give me an antiderivative for f of 2x or f of 5x or something like that. So those things are well and truly in bounds, and it's likely that, again, they'll be on general functions rather than some specific function for which, those students, as I've been saying, who have a computer algebra system would have an unfair advantage. There's not going to be an unfair advantage, right, for the kids with a higher level of technology available.
Yeah, agreed. And I'm going to see if I can share this, Mark. This is I just threw up an example of one of the 5 for 5s that were going to be in the Dropbox. So this is one for AB. This was yesterday's 5 for 5. So it's not meant to be an entire FRQ, where it's not like one big FRQ problem. I'm just picking different topics I think are important for the exam for my kids and kind of filing them in each day. But here's what the 5 for 5 looked like for Calc AB day 2. If you look on it, you're going to see a graph of f prime given, and you have some things labeled, and then a table of values. So someone's asking about these computer algebra systems. Well, you can ask derivatives and integration with problems like this. Well, that's not going to help at all because it doesn't know what these functions are, right? I'm not giving an equation for them. And so they're kind of
yet you still have to know those rules.
Yeah, and notice, find the minimum value of f, right? So we don't have an equation for f, but we can still solve that problem. Or this is a nice quotient rule problem, but instead of just saying e to the x, it's going to be e to the g of x. So students are going to have to know that rule, but also be able to apply it to a generic function. Hey, here's a great example, Mark, of one of your mean value theorems, right? Ideas here. I always tell my students, if you see a problem that starts off with, is there a time, or can you guarantee, or must there exist, kind of these like hypothetical type questions, you pretty much know it's going to be an intermediate value theorem or a mean value theorem problem, because we call those
or an extreme value
theorems.
Theorem.
Yes.
That's right. And there's only 3. There's only 3.
Yeah, 3 existence theorems for calculus, right? So this is another good example of how we could test U substitution, right? You don't notice this off the bat, but this is a U substitution problem. It's the integral of g of x quantity squared times g prime, and you have to recognize the form, the structure that we can apply U substitution. We can change the limits because of that. So those are the kind of problems that I'm putting up in there for the 5 for 5. So you'll see those. You'll see a lot of graphical stems, a lot of numerical stems, and even if there's an equation, it would be more generic. That way, it's not just going to be sine of 2x, something like that.
Right. So there was these are just spot on, Brian. They're just spot on. So we had another question about what are for the BC students, those rate in and rate out questions. There's some famous examples of those, like you have a tank of water, and there's water being pumped into the tank, and there's water at one rate, and there's water draining out of the tank at a different rate. We had a problem with people that were in an amusement park that were entering the park at one rate and exiting the park at a different rate. So you have these competing rate in, rate out problems that are well and truly applications of the integral. So for BC students, those questions and even the contextual questions are still in play this year. For AB students, that's a Unit 8 topic, and they won't be tested.
Yeah, and even if it's tested on BC, it may not look like what you've seen before, because we know a graphing calculator is not going to be needed or used, and so typically those rate in, rate out problems generally are ugly equations, but they could easily make one with a graph or a table.
That's right, and still ask questions even if they had a specific function. Just ask for setups.
Yeah.
Right. So give me an integral expression that'll tell me how many people are left in the park, or how much water is left in the tank, or whatever other kind of scenario you might contrive where there's 2 different rates involved.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Mark, while you're talking, I'm going to write on the screen here. I'm sharing my smart notebook here, and I want to just mention kind of what Mark mentioned. This is going to be a really, really lame example, because I don't want to write something fancy. I just want to show you with a simple example how we could write our work for L'Hopital's rule, right? So if we had something like limit of, as x approaches 2, of x squared minus 4 over, we'll just say 5x minus 10, something like that, right? Now, you and I know there's much easier ways to solve this problem, and this would not appear on the exam like this, because you could type that into Google, it'll give you the answer, right? but it might have an f of x involved or a g of x where you couldn't just type it in. But if you were trying to apply L'Hopital's rule on a problem, any problem, really the best thing that you should do on your paper is when you see a limit problem, just immediately write the limit of the numerator, right? Find the limit of the numerator. What's that going to give me? 0. And then also
can you put
separately,
parentheses around that? Could you put parentheses
I
around
knew
that x
that.
squared minus
I knew
4
that you
there,
were going to
Brian?
call me.
Right?
I knew you were going to call me on that one, Mark. I was trying to give Mark a good illustration of his parenthesis comment from earlier, his top 10 list, and the limit
Thank
as
you so much.
x approaches 2 of the denominator also approaches 0, right? This is the conditions, and I always wondered why do we always call it L'Hopital's rule, right? It's really a theorem. I mean, I would advocate in my class. I actually name all my notes. My students think of it as L'Hopital's theorem because when you say theorem, it kind of puts it in the same ballpark as mean value theorem, intermediate value theorem. And when you hear those theorems, you know, oh yeah, I have to do a couple of conditions, a couple of checks
There's
first, right?
Yep.
And this is my hypothesis that we have 0 and 0. So now that we do that, we can apply L'Hopital's rule. Now, you can go ahead and write LH like you want if you want to. Like Mark said, as long as we show the conditions, we don't have to state that, but you're welcome to communicate that. And then L'Hopital's theorem says once you've verified that you get 0 over 0 or something like that, then we can just differentiate the numerator, differentiate the denominator, and then reapply our answer, right? Notice, by the way, a couple things. I never wrote equals 0 over 0. I showed the separate limits. Also notice that we use limit notation, right? So many times, two things happen, I see. Students sometimes will just drop limits. They won't show limits, right? Because you think that what you're writing down is scratch work, right? What you're writing down is not for you as a student. It's for us as a reader. And so you have to make sure that you don't just get lazy and leave things off because without that limit there, these two expressions are not the same, right? X squared minus 4 over 5x minus 10 is not the same as 2x over 5 because specifically when x is 2, x squared minus 4 over 5x minus 10 is undefined. There is no graph, right? So the limit is allowing us to find the hole in that graph. And so that's why that limit's important. And then also, if you're showing like continuity, a lot of times we'll show the limit from the left equals the limit from the right if you're trying to verify continuity somewhere. And we'll see this a lot.
Right.
Limit equals limit, and I call those naked limits. I say limits are like grandmas. They should never be naked running around, right? You got to put clothes on those limits. You have to have a function. I'm probably going to be booted off of Fiveable forever now for that comment. I apologize, but it's late, right? So I start losing my filter once we get going closer to the end of the session, but you've got to have something.
It's a good analogy.
So make sure that that's notation. Notation's a big part of that exam.
Yep. And we had a question in the chat also about notation. People were asking when I busted your chops, or actually you lured me into busting your chops, Brian, about those parentheses around the limit as x goes to 2 of x squared minus 4. Someone said, so I have to put the parentheses there before you'll get credit? Well, I can't say yes or no to that question because the real answer is that it depends upon a particular problem. But to be safe, I think you always want to communicate exactly how you're, what you mean by the expression that you're writing on the page. So if parentheses make it more clear, then by golly, use parentheses. This thing that Brian's writing right here, maybe it's really, those things would be the same, whether where you're doing the limit as x goes to 2 of x squared, and then subtracting 4 from that, it's the same value as if you say the limit as x goes to 2 of the quantity x squared minus 4. So to make it to be clear is always a good idea, right?
Yeah.
So when there's when you can do it.
Yeah. Hey, time me real quick. You ready? So tell me.
Ready.
All right. Stop. How long would that take me?
Oh, that was less than a second, I think.
Okay, so the time frame it took to be more clear took me less than a half a second, probably. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
So
yes.
Just show things clearly because, like Mark said, whenever you do something that's not technically correct, there are a lot of things that we don't count off for or we don't penalize on the exam, even though it's not exactly correct because there's only so many points to go around. But as soon as you do something that's not proper, you've put your points in peril. Stephanie Ogden is the
right.
College Board
Right.
lead for AP Calculus, a brilliant woman who's been a longtime reader, question leader. Now she's working for College Board, head of the calculus exam. And she used to always say, you're putting your points in peril, meaning whenever you do something that's not quite right, you've now risked those points.
Right.
It's not worth it. You've got this year, even more than
Right.
ever, 45 to 50 minutes basically to verify this whole entire year of effort, right? And so make sure that you do everything you can.
Another common one is let's make sure we put differentials, the dx or the dy, in our integrals. You know, the integral of f of x times dx. That dx there signals that this is the end of my integrand. And sometimes if you leave it off, the end of where that integrand might be would be ambiguous. And when you're ambiguous, we can't assume that you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
The work has to be correct as we look at it, and without any kind of reading your mind for what you really meant.
I tell my students, Mark, I know how brilliant they are. I know how great they are. But the person reading your paper can't know that anonymous unless you tell them. You're anonymous. And so the burden is on you, the student, to do that, right? So I think this was fun, Mark. How did this hour go by?
How did you and I go this far into our lives without ever having an opportunity to work this closely together, Brian? That's what I want to know.
And I want to know.
I'm old, man.
Mark, we've been quarantined, by the way. I'm sorry to get off topic. I got to tell you, I haven't seen you face to face for a long time. We've been quarantined for 7 weeks. I get this scruffy, kind of cheesy bared hair, and you got this amazing, like, I feel like you're getting ready to have a new TV show on Discovery Channel, like a mountain man. I'm going to see you on TV, like hunting a lion, in a couple of weeks. You got this manly looking, outdoorsy look.
I've been working hard on this. This year.
Well, I've been working hard on this, and I'm just not as talented. But
well, I know what you've been working really hard on, Brian, and it's been work that's really helped all of us in the AP Calculus program. And again, thanks for all that hard work. You've made life easier for a lot of these students and a lot of the teachers as well. So again, thanks for all of that, and please pass on those same expressions to your co-star.
I will.
Tony Record, who I didn't know if you knew that, but I worked with Tony a little bit with some of the New York or the Kentucky stuff. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's a great. Tony lives 30 minutes away from me. He's a great guy. And Mark, like I said before, you have always been one of my early calculus heroes. And you mentioned you might have been reading before you might have read my AP exam. I graduated high school in 1997. You might have been.
Yeah, I was reading in 1997. That was actually, that was a little before my time on the development committee, so I wouldn't have written any of the questions for your exam, but I was definitely grading and even a question leader in 1997. So
yeah. Well, Mark,
I go back to my first year at the reading was 1989. God help me.
Oh my Lord, I was in fourth grade.
It's amazing I could still walk.
Well, every time I get with you, Mark, I want to make sure I get as much as I can from you. So maybe we'll take a couple more final questions in case anybody has them. I know people might be logging off. I don't know if they have other streams to go to, but this has been an amazing group. What a great chat.
Well, they want to know what you got on they want to know what we got on the calculus exam, Brian.
Well, I have to admit, so quick story. My sister is 7 years older than me. Okay. So she was a math major as well. And when I was in seventh grade, at the end of my seventh grade year, before eighth grade, she was home for that summer because she was home from college, and she was taking Calc 2 at the local college. She was doing a summer course nearby to kind of get ahead of the program, whatever she was doing. I don't know. I was too young. I was in seventh grade. But my seventh grade summer, I took Calc 2 at the university. So we would go to college. By the way, I was only in Algebra 1, right? But in the summertime, we went to the university like 3.5 hours early every day for class. And she would just teach me all of the trig and pre-calc that I needed to know for that day. And then any calc I might need to know. So I took Calc 2, all the series and stuff. And then I wasn't enrolled, but the professor would let me take the tests. And he always made my test the curve. So my test was the benchmark. So my test became the 82%, I think it was. So if they beat me, they got above an 82. If they didn't beat me, they got below an 82. But I took Calc after my seventh grade year. And then because it was like not official, I had to go back to eighth grade and take Algebra 1. That's the course I was enrolled in. So I had to repeat. But luckily, when I got into high school, I was able to test out at another university and kind of skip the AP exam. So I didn't get the opportunity really
how about
to
that?
take the full exam,
I see.
but it was fun. Did you take the AP exam, Mark? Did they have that in 1904?
I did take it in 1973, and I have a really quick story to tell about that. I can still remember, Brian, walking out of that exam and knowing that I knew what to do. I didn't get a perfect score, but I knew what I was doing on every question but one part of one question. And I told one of my friends, Judy Broadwin, this story. Brian, you probably know Judy. I worked many years with Judy at the AP Reading, and I told Judy this story, and she said, "Oh, what was the problem that you didn't know on the exam?" And I explained that it was a dummy variable. It involved the fundamental theorem, and I just got hung up by the spelling of the variables in this problem. And she said, "Oh, that was 1973 BC7." She knew the year and the problem number that I was having. There used to be 7 problems on the exam, and I thought, "Oh my God, this woman is incredible." but the point, the real point of that story is it feels so good when you finish the exam and you know that you knew what you were doing. There was nothing that really stumped you except maybe one little piece of one. That's a good feeling. You can get yourself ready now. So do what you can now, and then when the time comes, you can strut after that exam and say, "Yeah, I knew what I was doing there. I worked and I got myself ready." So
there was a really great
again,
question.
Brian,
real quick, a great question that came across just now. I want to make sure I answer it about how many points this year's exams are going to be worth. So first of all, I'm going to say we don't know, right? Here's what we do know. Question 1 is going to be 60% of the overall points, and question 2 is going to be 40%. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to have to be a certain amount of points. They can have them different point values and then weight them afterwards, right? The multiple choice typically is weighted times a 1.2 to get it to the proper weight. So we don't know what the points are. But also, we don't know what it's going to look like. But here's what I'm thinking, Mark, as a possibility. With only 2 questions, when you have 45 multiple choice questions and a whole bunch of FRQs, it's a lot easier to draw those lines between what a 3 and a 4 and a 5 would look like. With 2 questions, it's a little bit harder. And so we're on a normal year, one particular question might only be worth 2 points, right? One little question. Well, that same question might be worth 3 or 4 this year in order to find out, more clearly what steps you got through. So, example, some years, a question like the first point might be somewhat basic, like, hey, setting the derivative equal to 0, that understanding to do that might be worth the first point. But then to earn the second point, you have to solve the whole problem correctly, get the answer, and all that stuff might be all wrapped up in the second point, which means you can have 2 students that both earned 1 point on that problem. One kid only knew one tiny thing, and the other kid knew a whole lot of calculus but made one tiny mistake. That's not a big deal normally because we have so many other questions to find out the differences between students. With fewer questions, they might say, okay, this is for every calculus thing that you've done correctly. If there's multiple calculus steps, they might parse those points out more granular. So we don't know. I don't want to speculate on the points. Just speculate on, like Mark said, are you doing good math, right? You have a feel of the exam of whether or not you know what you're doing or not. Don't get caught up on the points because we don't know. And I hate to say it's irrelevant, but in some ways as a reader, Mark, on our end, we would say it's kind of irrelevant how many points you give something as long as it's able to discern between students. So that part's not going to be the big deal about the individual points.
This was fun, Brian.
Yeah, I had this was one of the most fun things I've done in a long time, Mark. Mainly my favorite part is every time you read the screen, we get this really cool close-up of you. It's like the zooming in of the Mark trying to read the screen. That's my favorite part.
That's them old eyes.
I thought maybe you'd have like the binoculars trying to read the
screen. I run to walls too when I don't have my glasses on. I should be having my glasses on so I can see.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. The solutions to the 5 for 5s will be in the same folder I shared. I put them in like a day or so later, so I'll be uploading the answers today for questions 1 and 2, and then I wait 1 day. That way, my students have to wait a day before they can see all the answers. So those will be in there. Don't worry.
Good.
Yeah, okay. I love it, Mark. You're my favorite calculus teacher of all time. I wish I would have been in your class when I was a student. I might have taken AP calculus and enjoyed the exam.
You're just way too kind. You're just way too kind.
Mark, hey, can I tell people the story about my email, right? My email line under my signature, under my name, it just says fifth grade spelling bee. It says fifth grade spelling bee runner-up. That's my greatest life achievement. I was the runner-up in a highly contested spelling bee in fifth grade. And I put that on my signature line because teachers always have like all these awards. They name all these things they've done. And I was like kind of playing a little joke on that. I put that on there, but I've kept it for like years now. And I emailed Mark the other day and he emailed me back and he noticed that line. And he told me that he too, I think, was the runner-up in a spelling bee. And I love the last line of your email, and I'm going to share this even if you, if you get mad at me, but he told me the word he misspelled. And he said, I misspelled this word disease because the person reading the word pronounced it wrong, like disease. And then he wrote, and I was a dumb kid. I missed the word because they pronounced it wrong, and I was a dumb kid. That was my favorite line.
I was going for phonetics. I changed the I to an E, the first I to an E. I still remember that. It's weird how you remember those things, right?
I know. So, maybe we'll be invited back for another one of these some other time, Mark.
Who knows? Who knows?
We'll see. But
it was good. Hopefully these students got something out of this. God bless you all and give you, the best wishes for this exam. We are with you. I know that I've been feeling it for my students this week, Brian, and last week too, when I look at their faces on Zoom every day and I see what they're going through. And the students this year on this AP exam, it's the same thing. It's hard. It's just hard, everything people are going through. So be good to yourself over the weekend. Try not to stress too much. Do the best you can, but be good to yourself along the way too. So, and you, Brian, do the same. You do the same, Brian, because I know that you've been burning the candles in the middle and at both ends, I think. And you need to be good to yourself too. Give yourself a break.
I appreciate
the stretch is just about done now, buddy.
Yep. It is. And for students who are taking the exam, do your best. Like Mark said, this is not life defining. If this test doesn't go that well, you can still CLEP, take the entrance exam when you go into college. You can still retake Calc if you have to. I mean, this is not going to define your future in any way. So we know there's unique circumstances this year. Be as prepared as you can. Do the best that you can, give it your very best effort. Don't ever quit no matter what, always keep pushing forward, but then realize this is not defining anything, right? You are defined by your actions and not by a score. So we're proud of you no matter what ends up happening.
That's great. That's a great words to live by.
Great. Mark, I don't know how to end this. I don't know what we do. Do we just stop talking? Do they boot us off?
I think we say end broadcast, Brian.
Okay.
I got an end broadcast button here, and I think once I say that, I think nobody's going to listen to us ever again.
Yeah, I did.
So here I'm going to do that.
Yeah, put me on my misery.
Go ahead. Okay, so long, everybody.
Hey, guys.